The city was just beginning to stir. Morning sunlight bounced off glass towers and steel beams, painting the streets with streaks of gold. But far from the blaring horns and the steady hum of office workers, an elderly man stood quietly outside one of the city's most luxurious car showrooms. The building itself seemed almost unreal. Glass walls reflecting the sky, chrome accents glinting in the sun, and inside a collection of the finest cars money could buy. He looked entirely out of place. His clothes were simple and worn, a faded brown jacket, a plain shirt, soft trousers, and scuffed leather shoes. Gray hair framed his weathered face, and a streaked white beard gave him an air of quiet dignity. Despite his unassuming appearance, his eyes were sharp and attentive, carrying the weight of decades of experience and the calm of someone who had seen life's highs and lows. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting the morning air fill his lungs. He didn't flinch at the passing luxury cars or the occasional glance of people walking by. His gaze was fixed on the showroom, on the promise held within the polished glass and metal. This wasn't greed, it wasn't desire, it was admiration, pure, measured, and respectful. With deliberate steps, he approached the showroom doors. They slid open automatically, revealing the bright, pristine interior. Sunlight poured through the high glass panels, bouncing off polished floors and reflecting from the sleek bodies of cars, arranged like jewels on display. Each vehicle seemed alive with precision, smooth curves, sharp edges, and finishes so perfect they seemed almost unreal. He walked slowly, almost reverently, tracing the lines of a black coupe with his fingertips. The metal was cool, smooth, and perfect. He paused for a moment, absorbing the craftsmanship, feeling a deep connection to the artistry before him. It was not a desire for ownership, but an appreciation for skill, for beauty made tangible. Then came a sound that shattered the quiet, a brisk, confident click of polished shoes on the showroom tiles. The elderly man sensed someone approaching and turned slightly. A young man, sharp in a black business suit, white shirt and shining shoes, appeared. He walked with the confidence of someone used to authority, his eyes narrowing as they locked on the visitor. "What are you doing here?" the young man demanded, his tone sharp and incredulous. The elderly man paused but said nothing, his calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the young manager's brash energy. "This is a showroom, not a street corner," the manager continued, his finger pointing accusingly. "Don't touch the cars. If the owner sees you, my job is gone. Move along." The words were meant to intimidate, but the old man only lowered his gaze slightly, a gesture not of submission, but quiet acknowledgement. Years of experience had taught him patience. He had faced scorn before, but he had never let it define him. The manager, frustrated by the lack of immediate response, stepped closer, voice rising. "I said leave, now!" Slowly, the elderly man stepped aside, not hurriedly, but just enough to satisfy civility. His head bowed slightly, posture respectful but unbroken. There was a subtle sorrow in his eyes, born from a lifetime of being underestimated, but there was also a quiet strength, a dignity that could not be shaken by a young man's arrogance. Outside, a dramatic change shifted the scene. A sleek black limousine glided silently to the curb in front of the showroom. Its polished surface reflected the city around it. The doors opened, and a man in a navy blue suit, white shirt and tie emerged, holding a folder. Every step he took was measured, precise, exuding both urgency and respect. His eyes searched the showroom, scanning for someone he had been looking for relentlessly. He approached the elderly man and gave a small, respectful bow. "Sir," he said, his voice calm but urgent, "we've been looking for you everywhere. Here are your new checkbooks and the documents for the showroom. You mentioned you wanted to finalize the purchase today." Time seemed to pause. The young manager, who moments ago had wielded authority like a weapon, froze mid-step. His confident smile vanished. His face went pale as realization dawned. He had misjudged the man standing before him.
The arrogance that had driven his insults moments ago crumbled in an instant. The elderly man straightened fully, calm and authoritative. "I came to purchase this showroom, but I will not allow someone here who does not respect others. Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of any organization. Those who fail to honor others do not belong in positions of power." The manager opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came. The weight of his arrogance, the immediacy of his misjudgment left him speechless. The personal assistant, still standing beside the elderly man, gave a subtle nod, silently acknowledging that justice had quietly arrived. For a moment, the elderly man's gaze drifted toward the rows of cars. He moved calmly towards the showroom's most prized vehicle. The driver opened the door with a practiced courtesy, and the man stepped inside, composed, confident, and serene. The limousine doors closed, the engine purred, and the scene settled. The young manager, watching helplessly from behind the glass, caught a glimpse of a lesson he would not forget. Appearances deceive, arrogance can be costly, and true value lies not in wealth or attire, but in character, patience, and respect. Even as the car pulled away, the story remained clear. Power, wisdom, and dignity do not announce themselves with loud words or flashy clothes. They are quiet, subtle, and often overlooked, until the right moment demands recognition.
The morning light bounced off the polished floors of the showroom as the elderly man settled briefly into the quiet hum of his surroundings. The cars gleamed like jewels, but all his attention, for the moment, was on the young manager, whose face was still frozen in disbelief. He had expected defiance, perhaps fear, but what he had encountered was calm, controlled authority. The weight of decades of experience radiated from the older man in subtle gestures, the tilt of his head, the firmness of his posture, the quiet confidence in his eyes. The manager swallowed hard, attempting to regain composure. I didn't know, he faltered, fumbling for words. His arrogance had evaporated in the face of something far stronger than wealth or age. Pride alone was not enough to command respect in this room. "Sit down," the elderly man said quietly, but with an unmistakable firmness that made even the polished shoes of the manager pause mid-step. "Let's not waste more time." The personal assistant, standing just behind him, handed over the documents once again, ensuring everything was perfectly in order. The papers gleamed under the sunlight pouring through the showroom windows, yet they represented more than just legal formalities. They were a symbol, a reminder that this man's authority was real and immediate. The young manager finally blinked, attempting a weak, shaky smile. I didn't mean any disrespect," he stammered. You assumed your authority mattered," the elderly man said, his tone calm but cutting. "And it does, but only when it is earned through respect and understanding, not through fear or arrogance." His words were measured, deliberate, leaving no space for argument. The manager shifted uncomfortably, realizing that every gesture he had made moments ago had been a miscalculation, a display of unchecked ego. The showroom seemed to pause in anticipation, the shiny cars reflecting both the light and the tense atmosphere. The elderly man's gaze swept across the room as though evaluating not just the vehicles, but every person in the room, every decision, every expression. The manager's confidence faltered further. Each second he remained in the presence of this calm figure, the more he felt the enormity of his misjudgment. Suddenly, the personal assistant stepped slightly forward. "Sir," he said, "there are a few urgent matters to finalize before the purchase. We need to ensure everything is ready, and—" His voice held a subtle urgency, hinting that time was of the essence. The manager's eyes flicked to the documents once more, his mind racing. He was still reeling from the shock of realizing that his assumptions had been entirely wrong. "Wait, what is happening here?" he asked, his voice tight, almost panicked. You're really buying this showroom?" The elderly man nodded, his expression serene. "Yes," he said, "and as I said, I will not allow anyone here who does not respect the people they work with or the customers who enter this space. Respect is the foundation of everything we build."
The young manager's lips parted, but no words came. His usual arsenal of sharp remarks, his rehearsed commands, all fell silent. For the first time, he understood that some authority could not be challenged with words alone. It was earned through integrity, wisdom, and the ability to see beyond appearances. The personal assistant handed the elderly man a pen. "These documents need your signature," he said respectfully. "Once signed, the transfer will be complete." The elderly man took the pen, his hand steady, and began to review the documents. Each page he turned reflected more than numbers and agreements. It reflected decades of experience, careful calculation, and vision. The young manager watched helpless as the weight of his misjudgment became undeniable. "You know," the elderly man said, quietly, almost to himself, "people often judge what they can see. Clothes, appearances, a quick glance. But the truth is rarely that simple. Power, knowledge, and character, they are quiet. They do not demand attention. They wait until it is time to be recognized." His words carried calm authority, resonating in the room more than any shouted command could have. The manager swallowed hard. He had spent years believing that his position, his title, and his sharp tongue could command respect. And yet here he was, confronted by someone who needed no title, no display, no arrogance to command it. The lesson was silent, sharp, and unforgettable. As the elderly man signed the final page, the personal assistant nodded and tucked the document safely into the folder. "Everything is ready. The showroom now belongs to you, sir." The young manager's face paled. He sank slightly against a wall, his mind spinning. His bravado, his arrogance, his assumptions, they had all led him here, and yet there was nothing left to do but witness the consequences of his misjudgment. The elderly man stood, a figure of quiet dignity, and walked toward the showroom's most prized vehicle. Every step was deliberate, confident, and serene. The personal assistant opened the car door, and the man stepped inside without hurry, without showiness, as though claiming what was already his due. From the corner of his eye, the young manager caught a glimpse of the limousine waiting outside. He realized then that the situation had changed entirely. The man he had dismissed, insulted, and underestimated was now in complete control. The tables had turned, and it had happened silently, with elegance, and without a single raised voice. For the elderly man, this was not a victory to boast of. It was a quiet confirmation of principle. Respect, patience, and dignity are always more powerful than arrogance. As he settled into the leather seat of the car, he allowed himself a small smile, not of triumph, but of satisfaction in knowing that justice, subtle but absolute, had been served. The manager, watching from behind the showroom windows, could only stare. He had thought he understood power, but now he understood humility and the painful cost of having none. The room, once filled with the polished glow of luxury and ambition, now held a lesson he would not forget. And as the elderly man waited to take the next step of his plan, the tension in the showroom hung in the air like a lingering note, sharp, instructive, and unforgettable.
The showroom seemed frozen for a heartbeat. The elderly man sat calmly in the leather seat of the showroom's most prized vehicle, the personal assistant standing attentively nearby, while the young manager struggled to reconcile the reality before him. He had expected a confrontation, maybe a heated argument, but nothing could have prepared him for this. Outside, the sleek black limousine gleamed under the morning sun, its presence commanding attention even among the glittering cars of the showroom. The engine hummed quietly, a low, almost imperceptible purr, as though aware of the drama unfolding inside. The manager, still stunned, noticed it first with a flicker of curiosity, then with rising alarm as the PA, young, efficient, perfectly composed in his navy blue suit, moved with purpose toward the elderly man. "Sir," the PA said, bowing his head respectfully, but speaking with a firm sense of urgency, "I've been looking for you everywhere. Your new checkbooks, the documents for the showroom, everything is prepared. You said today was the day you wanted to complete the purchase. The words hit like a hammer. The young manager froze, his previously confident posture now crumpled with disbelief. The room seemed to shrink, every polished car reflecting not wealth alone, but the unassailable authority of the man he had insulted. He swallowed hard, his mouth opening and closing, searching for a response, but none came. For the first time, he saw the truth. This was no ordinary man. This was someone whose quiet confidence, whose measured calm, held more power than his arrogance could ever command. The realization washed over him, sharp and disorienting. The elderly man, in simple, worn clothes, gray hair streaked with white, exuded authority not because of titles, money, or display, but because he had earned it through patience, wisdom, and integrity. The elderly man rose slowly from the car, each movement deliberate, projecting a calm that demanded attention. He glanced at the young manager, eyes meeting his with a mixture of understanding and resolve. "I came here today to purchase this showroom," he said, his voice steady, "but I will not keep someone in my establishment who cannot show respect. Respect is the foundation of any organization. Those who fail to honor others do not belong here." The manager's face went pale. His arrogance, once towering, was now a fragile thing, cracking under the weight of reality. I can explain," he stammered, but the words sounded hollow even to him. The quiet authority of the elderly man had already drawn a line that could not be crossed. The PA handed the elderly man the folder containing the final documents. "Everything is ready," he said. "Once signed, the transfer will be complete." The elderly man took the folder with calm precision. His hands, though aged, were steady as he began reviewing the papers. Each page was a small testament to order, to planning, to purpose. The young manager watched, unable to tear his eyes away. He realized painfully that all his assumptions about wealth, appearance, and authority had been wrong. Everything he had relied on to maintain his sense of power had failed him in an instant. As the elderly man signed the final page, the room seemed to hold its breath. The cars gleamed, reflecting the sunlight, but more importantly, reflecting the lessons of the moment. Arrogance is temporary, respect is eternal, and true authority needs no display to be recognized. "Done," the elderly man said, sliding the documents back into the folder. He nodded once to the PA. "Everything is complete. Thank you." The young manager could only watch, helpless, as the reality sank in. The man he had dismissed, insulted, and underestimated was now in full control. Every gesture, every glance of calm authority had rendered his previous arrogance meaningless. He had misjudged not only the elderly man's character, but also the subtle power of patience and dignity. The elderly man turned toward the most expensive vehicle in the showroom, the car that seemed almost alive with anticipation. The driver opened the door with practiced courtesy. He stepped inside, settling into the seat with a serenity that contrasted sharply with the young manager's frantic energy. The personal assistant followed, placing himself slightly behind, ready to act, ready to serve. Outside, the limousine waited patiently, engine purring, reflecting the late morning sunlight across its polished black surface. The scene was cinematic, a man who had been underestimated, an assistant executing every task with precision, and a shocked young manager who could only stand frozen, realizing the consequences of his arrogance. "Do you understand now?" the elderly man asked softly, almost rhetorically, as he adjusted the seat. His calm gaze met the manager's one last time. "Power, respect, and dignity are not in what you wear or what you command. They are in how you treat others, how you carry yourself, and the patience to let your character speak." The young manager swallowed hard. His mind raced through everything that had led to this moment, the assumptions, the insults, the prideful gestures, all now meaningless. He sank slightly against the wall, his previously confident posture now crumpled with defeat. For the first time, he understood the true cost of arrogance, the invisible toll of disrespect, and the quiet but absolute weight of genuine authority. The limousine doors opened with precision, the elderly man stepping in with composure. The personal assistant ensured the documents were secure and followed with practiced efficiency. The young manager watched from behind the glass wall, pale and silent, as the man he had dismissed, insulted, and underestimated was now in full control. Every gesture, every glance of calm authority had rendered his previous arrogance meaningless. He had misjudged not only the elderly man's character, but also the subtle power of patience and dignity. The elderly man turned toward the most expensive vehicle in the showroom, the car that seemed almost alive with anticipation. The driver opened the door with practiced courtesy. He stepped inside, settling into the seat with a serenity that contrasted sharply with the young manager's frantic energy. The personal assistant followed, placing himself slightly behind, ready to act, ready to serve. Outside, the limousine waited patiently, engine purring, reflecting the late morning sunlight across its polished black surface. The scene was cinematic, a man who had been underestimated, an assistant executing every task with precision, and a shocked young manager who could only stand frozen, realizing the consequences of his arrogance. "Do you understand now?" the elderly man asked softly, almost rhetorically, as he adjusted the seat. His calm gaze met the manager's one last time. Power, respect, and dignity are not in what you wear or what you command. They are in how you treat others, how you carry yourself, and the patience to let your character speak. The young manager swallowed hard. His mind raced through everything that had led to this moment, the assumptions, the insults, the prideful gestures, all now meaningless. He sank slightly against the wall, his previously confident posture now crumpled with defeat. For the first time, he understood the true cost of arrogance, the invisible toll of disrespect, and the quiet but absolute weight of genuine authority.
The limousine purred softly as it glided out of the showroom, its glossy black surface reflecting the sunlight in shards of brilliance. Inside, the elderly man sat composed, a quiet authority in every line of his face. The personal assistant, perfectly attired in a navy blue suit, sat just behind him, holding the folder of signed documents with meticulous care. The young manager, meanwhile, remained frozen behind the glass, his expression a mixture of disbelief, fear, and regret. For the first time, the weight of the morning's events fully sank in. He had believed his title, his posture, and his sharp words were enough to command respect. Yet here he had witnessed something far more powerful, a calm, patient man whose life experience, dignity, and principles spoke louder than any arrogance ever could. The elderly man turned to the personal assistant. "It's time," he said simply. The assistant nodded, understanding the silent command. Together they walked back inside the showroom. The young manager instinctively straightened, attempting to mask his apprehension, but it was futile. Every step the elderly man took exuded confidence and control, leaving no doubt about who truly held authority. "Please," the elderly man said, voice firm yet calm, "call the HR department. This manager," he glanced toward the young man, "is no longer needed in this organization." The manager's eyes widened. He had expected confrontation, perhaps a warning, but not outright dismissal. Panic flickered across his face. "Wait, sir, I can explain," he stammered. "No explanation is necessary," the elderly man interrupted. His tone was measured, leaving no room for argument. A person who cannot respect others does not belong in a position of power. Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of every successful organization. Those who fail to honor others will face the consequences of their actions. The young manager's shoulders slumped. The bravado, the arrogance, and the misplaced confidence all evaporated in the face of quiet, undeniable authority. He realized painfully that his assumptions had led him astray. He had underestimated someone based on appearance, and the lesson had been both swift and absolute. As HR was contacted and arrangements made for the manager's departure, the elderly man's focus returned to the showroom itself. He moved gracefully among the gleaming vehicles, his presence transforming the space. Staff and visitors who had witnessed the morning's events now regarded him with quiet respect. The lesson had been delivered, not through confrontation, but through calm action, integrity, and decisive leadership. Later, seated once again in his limousine, the elderly man reflected on the events of the morning. The city outside moved with the same relentless energy, oblivious to the quiet drama that had unfolded within the showroom. Yet within him, there was satisfaction, not for the luxury he had claimed, but for the affirmation that respect and integrity always prevail. The young manager's departure was inevitable. His arrogance had been replaced by reflection, and perhaps in time, understanding. He would remember the humiliation, yes, but he would also remember the lesson. Appearances can deceive, and authority is not measured by titles or clothes, but by the treatment of others and the strength of one's character. As the elderly man leaned back in the leather seat, eyes closing for a moment, feeling the calm that follows justice, he had come expecting nothing more than a purchase, yet he had delivered a lesson that would echo far beyond the showroom walls. True wealth, he realized, was not in the cars, the money, or the documents. True wealth lay in dignity, patience, and the ability to command respect without demanding it. As the limousine moved through the city streets, reflecting sunlight across its glossy black surface, one thought remained clear. Never judge a man by his clothes, his age, or the simplicity of his appearance. True value reveals itself quietly, patiently, and invariably. And in that quiet morning, amidst the glittering glass and steel of a luxury showroom, a man in simple clothes had demonstrated more authority, wisdom, and true wealth than anyone else in that city could hope to claim. The lesson, subtle yet absolute, had been delivered, and it would not soon be forgotten.